So right now we're extremely open to people that at least know 2 to 3 different languages, backend specific, that's willing to learn new languages. We help them transition to that. I would be extremely open to taking on whatever task was necessary at the company. And also, if I spent my weekend building my own company, I would bring skills and knowledge from that back to the organization, which would add even more value to what I was already being compensated for. So we are looking to hire people who can add value right away, not just on work product, but also culturally. A big difference that I would say that we focus on is we don't hire for culture fit, we hire for culture value add. I would say nothing is more valuable than somebody who comes to your company, even if they're only there for 2 years, like I was saying, and they started their own company. They will leave the company being extremely energized and also always be your biggest supporter.
Hi all, good morning. So today I have Martin with us, who helps companies automate their customer service processes and leverages their online presence to optimize social media interactions and conversions, which is something that's so important, especially when the pandemic hit, because a lot of people shifted towards online shopping. Let's welcome Martin on 10 Minutes of Hiring Wisdom, where he will tell us about his company, what he's learned along the way, and whether his company is hiring or not. Hi Martin, how are you doing today?
Doing great. Thanks so much for having me on.
Of course. So Martin, can you tell us about your company, where you work, and what your role is within the company?
Absolutely. So I'm the co-founder and CEO of Volt. So Volt is building compliance for the next generation of SMS, really moving from a marketing play to be more now deeper into infrastructure. So very exciting shift.
Okay. And where did the idea come from?
So everything has always been kind of a red thread for us, from me trying to solve my own problem at the original idea, from leading a sales team with a medical device startup. And then now, after having spent 2 years focusing on building that out, we realized there was a lot of issues even higher up in the funnel for channel of SMS, and basically just decided to solve our own problem all over again. And with a lot of very strong back-end engineers, we basically ended up with a pretty innovative solution for us to be able to finally see when a message doesn't deliver, and get some insight into why for the first time, instead of just having to wait for a client to tell us that their customers never received the message, which is what's industry standard today.
Okay. And I'm curious about the name. Why Volt? As in, is there some backstory behind the name?
Yeah. So the shift from, so our previous company was called RespondFlow. And that was tied to the product. So we were really only a one product shop. So when we decided to rebrand to give more ability for us to launch more of an API product and go deeper into infrastructure, we decided to go for a name that would be setting us apart from what is very typical in this industry, which is just having a company with a name tied directly to text or SMS, and go more for a young, more energetic brand to symbolize us really invigorating and changing the industry and channel.
No. I think the name itself, well, it's very catchy, which is why I asked, because usually a lot of brands have shorter names and there's always a backstory. So I was curious about that. So thank you for sharing that. I'd like to understand, Martin, where is your company currently at? You currently are at 20 employees. Is your company growing? What stage you are at, and whether your company is hiring? Can you elaborate a little more on that?
Yeah, no, perfect timing, actually. We closed our $2.5 million seed round last summer.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. So that got us to have a first wave of a lot of hires, where we hired a lot of senior management and brought in a lot of much needed experience. With me and my co-founders having really started this company more or less straight out of college, it was important for us to get a lot of people with more experience than us to tell us how to really scale it from here. And as we got to bring them on last fall, now we're getting out with our new product, which should launch on May 24th, which should then spur us to triple our engineering capacity and hire on what I believe will be around 10 to 15 product and software engineer capability. So will be a lot more positions opening up over the summer.
Okay. And what kind of tech stack would you be needing? Just curious, because a lot of people, there's so much tech stacks these days. So I think for people who would want to apply, they should have an advanced notice as to what they should seek for.
Absolutely. I mean, for us, we're very back end. So especially as we're going deeper into an infrastructure play, we decided very early on to build in Rust, which was at the time very low utilization, and there wasn't that many engineers who had prior experience, given that the language was only a year old when we started implementing it. So right now we're extremely open to people that at least know 2 to 3 different languages, backend specific, that's willing to learn new languages. We help them transition to that. Obviously, with senior engineers, is better for them to have at least dabbled in it previously. But for the junior engineering positions, those are pretty open.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. So my next question for you would be, what is your company's culture like? Because you're a growing company, you're going to be hiring a lot of people. What are some of the core values that you would want people to embody when they do join your company?
Yeah, that's actually one of my favorite questions. I mean, so I guess to answer that, a better answer is to give a little bit of backstory on me myself. So I grew up in Norway, born and raised, lived there until I was 20. So I just got to the US about 7 years ago. And after having worked in kind of corporate myself here out of college, it was very apparent to me that there's a big difference in how employees as well as the employer relationship works. And specifically when it comes to health benefits and vacation. So growing up, I knew that my parents basically had 8 weeks of mandatory vacation, not just like open vacation. So that led us to have a great upbringing, being able to go sailing for about a month every single summer. And that was extremely valuable to me as a kid growing up. And I would want my employees to be able to do the same for their children. And that's why we have an open PTO policy where we're more or less pushing everybody to at least take 4 weeks. And on top of that, healthcare was also a big thing. If anybody got hurt, we knew that was just taken care of by the government. So basically just realized that why would that not be a thing here? So we're covering 100% of the premiums for health, dental, life, and vision insurance. And then, of course, on top of that, making sure that everybody has ownership. I take a very big stance on, like, if I'm asking somebody who's interviewing with me, and this might be me giving away some secrets here on how to interview with Wolt, but if I ask them where do they see themselves in 2 years, and their answer is not with Wolt, but starting my own company, music to my ears. That's exactly what I'd love. If we are losing employees to them starting their own company, that means that I've done my job right. I wouldn't be here. Wolt wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the fact that my previous employer did the same and encouraged me to start stuff on the weekend, make sure that I had side hustles, because he knew that if I was entrepreneurial, I would be extremely open to taking on whatever task was necessary at the company. And also, if I spent my weekends building my own company, I would bring skills and knowledge from that back to the organization, which would add even more value to what I was already being compensated for. So more than anything, it's almost selfish. But from the standpoint of helping people develop themselves, I feel like that's how you get the best people anyway.
Well, that is very inspiring. And I think the healthcare system, as all of us know, in the US sucks. So when we actually hear about companies doing this and stuff like this, it's very inspiring just because it's a breath of fresh air. A lot of companies I know will be like, oh, as in like, you are covered, but you have to pay a certain monthly installment. So it's just as in like, I lived in Berlin, Germany for like 6, 7 months, and the healthcare there was absolutely amazing. And now I'm in the US, and it's just like, it sucks, but I'm glad that people like you realize the gap that exists between the European market and the American market and are doing something about it. So thank you for sharing that. A follow-up question for that would be, so you mentioned that you would want people to start their own companies and everything. I think a lot of companies these days, usually startups specifically, want people that would come and stick with them and wouldn't leave. So what would be like, how would you address something like that? Of course, it varies from company to company, but how would you address that fine line between having someone join and having someone leave very soon, as soon as they start to add value to the company itself?
Oh, yeah. So I would say, like, for us, we are looking to hire people who can add value right away, not just on work product, but also culturally. A big difference that I would say that we focus on is we don't hire for culture fit. We hire for culture value add, where we find people who has hopefully already experienced amazing culture at their previous organizations or experienced completely awful culture. Either way, you usually learn and you're left with a lot of just like emotions and willingness to impact that. And I want to open up for that. And I want people to add a lot to it. So while there is a lot of learning that goes on in the first couple of months, especially with our product where it's deeply technological and in an industry like telecom, which, I mean, how many people really understand telecom? It's definitely not what I imagined initially when I came to the US that I'd be doing. But when it comes to like seeing the value from it, I would say nothing is more valuable than somebody who comes to your company, even if they're only there for 2 years, like I was saying, and they started their own company. They will leave the company being extremely energized and also always be your biggest supporter. They will continue to talk about how supported they felt and how valued they felt, and the fact that there was no bitterness when they left. And I mean, hopefully I find myself in a position where I can invest in a lot of them. And from that point on, continue to be a part of their journey. So like from the standpoint of seeing kind of like the value on like, okay, you want to keep people and you don't want to keep people. I mean, from that standpoint, I always view that as still keeping them. And they're always going to be a part of the Volt family. And especially after 2 years, they've already vested. They're past their two, kind of like their 1 year cliff. So at that point, they'll always be shareholders as well. So
Okay.
I guess it's a matter of just how you look at it. But yeah.
No. Well, Martin, you're definitely very inspiring, and I think a lot of people would be very lucky to work under you because the way you phrase your company, the way the values are centered around employees is something that's very refreshing. So thank you for sharing that. But other than that, Martin, our time is up. It was an absolute pleasure learning about you, your wonderful company, and how it came into existence, and the way you structured around employees rather than just the people at the top of the hierarchy. It's very refreshing, and it's great to see that people like you exist who are out there making a difference in their employees' lives.
No, thank you so much. Appreciate you having me on.